Today I've come to the Yorkshire Dales because it's the perfect conditions for going for a walk. Not too cold, not too hot, not too breezy, not too wet. Fingers crossed not yet anyway. But when it comes to photography, especially of this beautiful landscape that's surrounding me, I'm just not being inspired. It's just a bit flat and meh. It's just so frustrating because, I mean, look at this view here. It's absolutely spectacular. With a little bit of golden hour light, it would be absolutely banging as a landscape photo. But today, I'm just going to move on. But hang on a moment. What if I told you that I've recently discovered a way of making the landscape pop, even on a day like today? Ah, you're intrigued now. All it takes is a little bit of blurring of genres. We've already deduced that traditional landscape photography on a day like today is just a non-starter, but I think that we can learn from those people who choose to photograph people. Yeah, that works. So my theory is, if we treat landscape features like portrait photographers treat people, I don't mean by posing them and all that stuff, because they're not going to do it, especially if you're photographing a sheep or something. But if we use the same techniques and approaches, I still think that we can make really interesting documentary style photographs of our walks and still make them pop, even on a day like today. And it all starts from turning your camera from that orientation to that one. So let's go for a walk and I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean. Because at the minute it's clear as mud, the mud that's currently cloying up my boots. God, what's with this rope? I came out for a walk, not a blooming IQ test. Whew, by heck, it's got warm now. I think I'm going to have to pause and take my jumper off. You'll have to bear with me because this channel is family friendly. I'm not bothered about you seeing me take my jumper off. It's more seeing me without the flat cap. That's not going to happen. So bear with me and I'll be back with you in a moment. There we go. Absolutely seamless. And I've even miraculously managed to get my camera out in the process in preparation for this next bit, because I think it's about time we talked about gear. All good photographers like to talk about gear, don't they? Not. Anyway, all good portrait photographers will always have at their disposal an excellent portrait photography lens. Ideally prime, so it's nice and fast, so we can make use of those sumptuous shallow depths of field, and a focal length somewhere around the 50mm mark or 85mm, which seems to be that portrait photography sweet spot. I've got a 35mm prime on my camera at the moment, which I suppose is quite wide for portrait photography, but I'm a novice at this, I'm still learning. Now, which way is it now? Ah, that way. Now we've got our camera gear sorted, all we need to do is find a subject that's going to stand out within our landscape and pose for us as our first portrait. What, you mean this? Well, I'm not usually one for photographing signs, but I suppose we could give it a go. So if I was a proper portrait photographer and this sign was my model, what do you think I'd be trying to work out? Well, I think I'd be trying to work out how it works in relationship with the background, how to position it so it looks like it's interacting with us, the photographer, and therefore viewer as well. I quite like the way that the valley is disappearing off at that side, so I could use it to potentially frame that aspect of the landscape. And I could also project this sign, the cross part anyway, above the horizon line, so that bit stands out. It's almost trying to work out where the light's hitting it as well, to try and make that show its face, for want of a better term. So what I think I'm going to do is wander around, try and find my best angle, and then we'll see how we can set our cameras to really make this sign shine. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. So I've decided that I think this is my favoured angle on this sign. The light's hitting it in a nice direction, It's pointing towards the valley in the background, and I can place it on the right-hand third, or just inside that right-hand third. So the frame is nice and neatly balanced and our subject still stands out. So now I've framed it up, let's talk about our camera settings. I'm going for my widest aperture, which is f3.5, because as I said earlier, we want that sumptuous shallow depth of field, because when it comes to portrait photography, we want our subject to shine. The background is just there for context. So with that, I'm setting my ISO at 100, keeping it as low as it will go on this camera, and that's giving me a shutter speed of 750th of a second. So let's give it a go and see what it comes out like. Well, I know it's a picture of a sign, but I'm reasonably pleased with how that one's come out. I like the way that the shallow depth of field is making it stand out from the background, and the positioning works half decently as well. But if this was a ski run for portrait photographers, I think it probably would have been a green run. I think I'm ready to move up to the blue, so let's head on up the path to see if we can find some more interesting subjects. This looks more like it. This area of the Yorkshire Dales is known as Norber Erratics. It's a series of precariously placed boulders in a field on the top of a hill. And I think we've just done a little bit of one-upmanship on the sign, especially with this magnificent specimen here. Not placed here by human hand in some kind of megalithic ritual, but actually purely natural. So let's have a wander around this and find an angle that works for my next portrait shot of the landscape. Oh, my knees. I have to suffer for my art. It's part of the process. Anyway, I think with this shot, a low angle is absolutely vital. Again, to project it above the horizon line, make it stand out, and also to get an air of perspective of this rock being placed upon these little plinths underneath. So what I'm going to try and do is maybe get a little bit of grass in the foreground, just to give the foreground a little bit more interest than the sheep feces that we had in the sign shot, and try and get an angle on this so there's not too much sky either, because I think that's just going to take the eye upwards and away, seeing as it's quite stout and close to the ground. So I'm going to set up again and give it a go. You know, I do sometimes wonder why I do this photography lark, but by coming round to this extreme low angle, I've got a lot more context and perspective from the background. I think it's a little bit more interesting. And from this angle, the rock actually looks like some kind of weird sheep on little legs, which I think ties in nicely with that Yorkshire Dales theme. I can also use these limestone blocks as visual stepping stones through the foreground into the composition, so I'm not getting too much of that overly bright sky in. And it's similar settings to before, this time f3.5, widest aperture again, and 500th of a second at ISO 100. Anyway, I'm going to take this shot and carry on my walk, because I know when I watch videos of people rolling around on the ground, there's only so much I can take before I start getting overexcited. So let's get going again. Since I last spoke to you, I've taken a few more portraits of the landscape. I didn't film myself doing them because I was following pretty much exactly the same principles, turning my camera to portrait orientation, utilising that shallow depth of field, and trying to make my subject pop from the background as much as possible. I know what the comments are going to say. The landscape photographers are going to say, well, that's not landscape photography. And the portrait photographers are going to say, well, that's not portrait photography. But quite frankly, who cares? If I was trying to do either of those genres justice on a day like today, then I probably would have gone home with no photographs whatsoever. But what I have gone home with, or I'm going home with, I'm not quite home yet, is a series of photographs that document my walk and will hopefully act as memories of it in years to come as I look back at them. And by approaching the landscape features as people in portraits, I feel that it's a really useful way of compartmentalising the landscape into those highlights, rather than always trying to think wide and thinking you've got to get everything in. So next time you're out and about in an uninspiring landscape on an uninspiring day, then why not switch your mindset and try to take portraits of the landscape? You never know, it might turn your photography day around, where you can go home with a series of photographs that you're proud of, rather than nothing at all. After all, what have you got to lose, apart from maybe your dignity and your sanity? But if you're anything like me, you probably lost those a long time ago. So, thank you for watching. If you'd like more inspiration on how to take photographs in flat light, watch this video next, and don't forget to like and subscribe and all that jazz if you've enjoyed the video. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Until then, bye for now.